So hopefully everyone can see. Let's see. That's being transcript. Okay, that's great. Again, my name is Cade Boone. I've been with DBC since 1999. Pretty much everyone in our kind of the front lines of finance, DBC finance support. Uh, our support manager, he was hired before me. Um, Actually, it's just finance DBC product manager. But pretty much kind of everyone on the front line, myself included, was hired around when I was hired. I would say within a year or so after me. So uh, a lot of years um, in our group, and I think we've pretty much seen everything. So today, what I'm going to go over is um, setting up a multi-purpose deal. And um, a lot of times what we do is we try to mimic somewhat from our tutorial project finance. That way, if you don't want to end up going back over the video, if you're better at kind of going along, reading, filling it in, you do that as well. But it's kind of a misnomer, basic and advanced, because that's really subjective, right? To the person who's using the program. So what I try to like to cover is at least setting up what's typically created, but not always, in a project finance module. And today that will be, we'll have something where we have more than one solution objective. For example, we'll set up a refund where hopefully we can get level savings. And then we'll set up some kind of a new money that can wrap around this refunding and produce overall level debt service. So we have kind of a number of things to at least create. And so we will be creating a proposed series. We will be creating a refund scenario. And then we will incorporate those into the project finance and run everything through the project finance. Okay. So this was from kind of a couple of weeks ago. I've added some since, but let's just say for argument's sake, we want to create as a separate issuer, because you remember within a database file, for example, the 2024 Q2 training.df2, you can create as many issuers as need be. The big thing to take away from that is if you are going to do a refunding, then make sure it's all under the same issuer. But that's no problem if you don't do that. I'm going to also show you how you can copy and paste from one issuer to another. So I could say, let's say, and this is where we can begin to build the parts that we know is going to be part of a project finance. I would say if you know early on when you're setting up, whether it's just proposed series, you're going to create series A, B, C, D, and so forth, and incorporate that into a project finance, or it's refundings or a combination of both. It's always, I would say, best if you create, except for the bond components, pretty much you can create everything else on the project finance level. That way, it reduces the amount of going into individual components within a project finance. Um, but even then, I'll show you some of the tips and tricks of, um, pulling up where you can see all your bonds on the project finance level, and you don't have to, like in the quote old days, have to go into individual series. The big takeaway is, if you know this early on, for example, it probably wouldn't make sense to set up a bunch of issuance costs across multiple series if you know they're going to be part of a project finance and you want to calculate that on an aggregate project finance level. That's just going to create more work for you. It's not always the case. You don't always know, but since you're here, if you know that, um, you know, just accordingly. Okay, so for the advance, what we could do is we can start off creating the refund case, and then we'll get into the new money project fund or new money project or new money series. So I go new. Typically, if I know I'm creating a refund, I am going to want to create the refunded bond series. So I could say it's 2018. Oops, sure, it's set to actual. Oh, there we go. Okay. And I may do a little bit of repeat from a couple of weeks ago just to touch on important, um, or what I feel is important to at least know. It doesn't hurt to reiterate. For example, anywhere in the program, if you happen to not quite know what something means, or should I include, should I change it, you can always hit the F1 key. That will pull up a pretty extensive help to that specific tab. For example, interest day basis. If you wanted to know if it's including or not LEAP, 366 or not, then you could see on an actual yes. Then actual 365, obviously no, for example. FAQ, these are legit frequently asked questions that we get. And if you've sent us your file in support, sometimes not only do we, when we respond and tell you how to correct it, sometimes we also will post the FAQ for you. And then finally, we also kind of have a glossary that I think is fairly helpful. For example, if you do a lesser of test for a reserve fund, I think someone's trying to get in. Make sure. Okay. So, lesser of test. If you have a question about, you're calculating something from Excel, how is DBC calculating it? A lot of times, F1 key, go to the glossary, and it will explain, or the formula behind it. And everything that we're going over today, you can, again, it'll be put up on YouTube, but you can also go into the project finance as well tutorial. I just want to make sure I'm assuming everyone's in and able to. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So going back here, going to enter in date. Let's just say, stick kind of with the 6/1. You'll notice different font color. That indicates information you've manually typed in versus information a lot of times the program will spit out or calculate. It's a little bit relative, say within bond components, and you're trying to solve, and you wonder why is it not solving the way you want it in a particular year. Well, if you go into the bond component and you see an amount or a date that's in blue, that means it's set in stone. You have to delete it or unprotect it. And the program is not going to override anything that you've hard coded in. So this is an actual series 6118. And let's say we've got serial bonds, like serial, say 30, let's see, 48, let's say it's to 50. And also, so in the program, we know there's going to be lots of information you're going to be entering in. The program is set up to what's most commonly created, and or off of any kind of industry arbitrage, any kind of regulations. So for example, when you create bond components, more times than not, they're going to be serial bonds. You don't need to make that change anywhere here on the screen. Okay. It's not going to run by the way you name it, meaning if we call this term 50 or a term bond, it will not assume to price as a term bond. That's determined down here whether our maturities that we enter in are going to be priced to each maturity entered, or is it a term bond where it's priced to the final maturity? If you're going to do some kind of a cab, convertible cab, or some kind of a note, typically less than a year, 18 months or so. And again, F1 goes into it a little bit more detail. Maturity structure. So if we said 61, 2, 6. Now, if these happen to be semi-annual, you can make that change. NA just means there's no day alignment. But if it had to be, whether this is an actual or some kind of a proposed, you could say, every year on the first business day or the first Monday or whatnot. And again, right mouse, kind of like any Windows-based product, right mouse click brings up a menu. Also, the F5 key will pull up the menu as well. You may have, I would say, I think everyone should know this, but Monday through Friday, 9 to 6 Eastern, is when support hours are official. We try to kind of keep an eye in and out of those times, but there's no guarantee. But we try to not have a bunch of support stacked up, by the time we start in the morning. So make sure help, tools, preferences, internet settings, your information's entered in here. If you're allowed or given open market securities to download, you put in that information here. If you have, I don't think a lot of our clients do, but MMD yield, like TM3 account, you would put that information, and I can show you how to download automatically. If you do have MMD from a TM3 account, you can put it in here and you can automatically download. Doesn't seem like we get a lot of support on that, assuming a lot don't, but, and I'll show you, you can paste or copy and paste if you've got, say, from Excel. And that goes for here as well. if you have rates already in an Excel, you can, copy and paste into these settings here, rate, yield, price. Um, Obviously, I don't have that, but let's just say it's at some kind of a 3. If these are not par bonds, I mean, this is information you're going to have, right? Because this is existing, this is a refunded series. So this is going to, hopefully on your end, there's not going to really be any guesswork. The big thing is if you copy paste, even if you think it's right, make sure and try to have at least one out of the per maturity, one out of the 3 columns unprotected or not in blue. You may think it's correct. Um, the reason is that if you do something like this, it will give you a warning message saying you've protected rate, yield, price. Basically, the output, you need to make sure and verify that it's accurate. We're not going to, produce some kind of an error message. And it's a pretty, it's not a warning message that's real short either. So it's fairly long in nature and it should catch your attention. So you can, right mouse click, go to unprotect, or you can just go to the cell, hit the delete key, and that will unprotect it as well. There's been a number of times where, uh, we've had someone send in their file saying, I don't understand why there's, this amount is not matching up, and accidentally, protected all 3 columns. So let's just say it's, you know, again, you're going to have this, you're going to type in all your amounts pretty much everywhere except itemized expenses. You're going most likely to enter in information in the thousands, an amount. Now, sometimes you may have a cap I or a reserve fund where you want to draw out a specific amount. Um, that will be to the penny. But if it's not that, which is rare, if it's not some kind of an itemized expense, um, then when you hard code in an amount, it will be in thousands. Obviously, something like this, it's not going to be, even all the way. And again, you can copy and paste. Um, there's also import, export as well from Excel. So save, Control S. Usually it's so quick you don't even see uh, the little hourglass. So we created now a term bond. You need to make this change down here because it's going to be priced to the final maturity. You put in your first sinking fund payment date. And this one term bond matures. Let's just say it's over. So this answers any questions of, well, what if I have multiple term bonds? No, each term bond goes in a separate bond component. Your serial bonds can go all in the same bond component as long as you're not trying to calculate, say, an expense off certain maturities, because the expenses formulas can only on the most detailed level calculate per bond component. So just remember that, if we have in this example a term of 55 and a term of 60, you can't put starting sinking fund payment dates in 51 all the way through 60, and it's, broken up into two different term bonds. So you have that, and then one more term. Again, I'll click on price to final maturity. It's going to put 5. I'll put, we forgot to put some kind of the issue amounts. Yeah. Yeah. This is information you're going to have, if you don't already, from an OS. So the big thing is, in a refunding, the only thing that transfers over into the refund case itself is if you have any kind of prior expense. Meaning, well, what about if I have a reserve fund? This has a reserve fund. I want to, have that included when I start the refund. I mean, you could create it here, but it doesn't transfer over. You have to do that on the refund case side, which we'll get to. But let me first set up call table. You can create as many call tables as need be. Let's see. Let's say it's 10 years out at par. Just because you create the call table doesn't mean it automatically links, because it doesn't know what's callable, what's non-callable. So you have to go into the setup. And again, I'm just doing the up and down arrows, space bar, toggles. That might also be a video that I'll do about keystrokes. And we also, in our help readme notes, if we have updated keystrokes, we put it in there, and they're also included towards the end of each tutorial that's located in help, just to let you know. Number of days notice. We'll get a lot of files sent to us in a refunding saying, how come all my bonds, or how come, slugs, I'm not purchasing any slugs. It's all cash. Well, if you type in a call date that happens to fall on or prior to the delivery date of the refunding, then those bonds are going to be called on delivery. Slugs need at least 30 days from purchase to when they mature for any kind of an interest-bearing slug. So that happens a lot of times. That's where the number of days notice, and again, this will be OS if it is. This just means, hey, no matter what my call date happens to be, it may fall, within, less than 30 days out from now. If I put a 30 days, it'll automatically add the 30 days to the delivery going out. And then, obviously if you have holidays and stuff like that, that's going to make some difference. But again, number of days notice, a lot of times in the OS, it'll tell you if you need to put that on there. In this case, though, that's not really applicable because the first call is 6/1/28, which is obviously much further out, 30 days, than our refund delivery date is going to be. Okay. Now, if this was some kind of a subsidy expense, some kind of an ongoing expense, there's a couple of ways of tackling it. One is you can enter it in here, and there's an area in the program where we can select to adjust prior expenses to savings and solution. Kind of the one drawback is if you do it that way, it will calculate off of the entire series. You may, for example, the 2018, you may have a partial refunding. Um, so, and another issue is a lot of times clients want to see that broken out in the savings report. That does not get broken out. It gets adjusted to the prior debt service. So there is another way of doing it where you create another formula in the proposed refunding series, and I'll show it how to do it. But and I'll but if you've already created some kind of an ongoing expense here, that's fine. Just letting you know, and I'll show you the toggle for that as well. Now, let's say in here, we went, oh, wait a minute, already created the 2020. I want to refund 2018 and 2020. How do I get it into a different issuer? You know, it's in the issuer DEF. I need to get it in advance. How do I do that? Well, you can go into the series, go to File, Save As. You can select. You can even create a brand new issuer. If I click OK, now you'll see it. If you want to ever, won't show you here, but if you ever need to, let's say, I don't want to go individually into each one of these and copy it, you can always highlight, right mouse click, or copy. If you type in the same short name, advance, and click OK, it will copy everything from the DEF into advance. This is in the FAQ tool questions. Now, the issue there is if you have same short name, it will give you a message saying, do you want to override? That's up to you. So if you have the same short name in issuer advance and DEF, and you don't want it to override, then you say no, and make sure then you might want to do something like individually, give it a different short name, or if it's individually, you can just save it. And yes, give it a different short name. So just kind of showing you that there. All right. So open, go back to the 2018. I think that was from a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Same kind of setup from the 2018 and 2020 was just straight up. We had some kind of serial bonds going out to 2050, 10-year call. Now, you create actual series. This is just the steps I usually go with. It's up to you. Don't have to create your refunded debt. You could create the refund case first, but now create the refund case. So it's a 2024. And again, when it creates the refund case, it will also create a proposed refunding shell, and it's attached to the refund case. If you know that going in, probably doesn't make a lot of sense starting off creating a proposed refunding series first, because then when you create the refund case, it'll give you a an already attached shell of a proposed refunding series. And then what you have to do is, you'll have to go refund series set up and then select the other. So if you do, I would say, as long as you don't kind of create the proposed refunding series, then first, then it creates less work. Now I will show a how to, and we're starting to get this a lot more about how do I purchase slugs or open markets for my cat buy, or, some kind of interest period. And I'll show you that here in a moment. That's about the only time. Because a lot of times we'll get a file sent to us, proposed series with that, and that isn't now an FAQ in the FAQ section, but any kind of escrow structuring, has to be done through a refund case. So in that instance, you'd have to create a dummy refund, and you would have to change the status proposed to proposed refunding, and you would link it. But here, going up and down here, refund assumptions, general by default slugs. This, if it's an open market, that's great. If it's a combination of both, it's just PV, cash. Down here, this, I would say, if you leave it on current, current doesn't mean necessarily the latest, newest slug rate file. That means it's whatever is linked, or whatever's the latest download you have downloaded. So you could see here, in this example, current is basically, it gets saved twice, current.slug, and in this case, an 05 June 24 .slug file. So obviously, because today's June 18th, I can't assume if I leave it on current that that's the case. So what do? Well, you go to SCCS button down here. These are free. Do current, you can do historic, type in the date. So if I said current, and it's going to give you this is on the path. I would suggest tools, preferences. This is where you would have your company name that shows in the reports. You'll see other directories for additional slug and open market. You can click, you can, set up your folder. Now you might say, well, what if I link it to some kind of a network or shared drive? That's fine. And that might be only, maybe your IT people will say you have to do it that way. But just know that, like anything, if you have it linked to a shared drive, someone deletes or someone removes it or moves it to another location, you'll have to go back in there and do it. But I would recommend, downloading this stuff and linking it. That way, you have a lot more kind of control on your end. And this goes for, now you will need a OMS login and password. And I believe each branch of your firm gets, I believe, 60 a year. So if everything's good on your end and you need that information, all you got to do is just send us an email saying, hey, I don't have my OMS login information. And again, tools, preferences, internet settings tab. That same tab where you put your name, company name, email address, and phone number under the email section. So, and again, just like slugs, only difference is it's not unlimited, but you can select, click OK, it's been installed. All right. So now when I go back, keep it on current. Now you notice again, the current.slug file is always going to be changing, right? Because it's going to be dictated by the last newest, whether it's today or a month ago or 2 weeks ago. Um, I would say if this is kind of an ongoing deal early on, keep it on current. If you're thinking, hey, going forward, it's going to change, the escrow is going to change some, and that's fine. Great. I would say once it's done and you ever think about, I need to go back at some point potentially and print out reports, I would then probably go and select, the final numbers based off of whatever that slug file is, right? I would probably recommend selecting it only because sometimes we have gotten, not really so much lately, but we would get some clients say, hey, I went back to print out my reports on this older deal and I'm getting vastly different numbers. Well, yeah, what if you're trying to, from 2 years ago, you need to go back in here and print out the reports and you keep it on current. Yeah, the rates were drastically different 2 years ago than this year. So it's going to use, if it's current, it's going to use a different slug file. Just to let you know on that. All right. Global proceeds escrow. That's We're going to have something a little bit more, um, nuanced. We're going to have some kind of a prior reserve. That's going to be an amount that we want to transfer, and we want it to spend in a particular way towards the escrow. So that means this, in essence, is going to get disabled. And I'll show you where. It's going to be in the prior debt icon, funds on hands tab, actually the escrows tab. But this is just straight up if you have some kind of it's just a global process, it's 100% filled with bond proceeds. You would enter in information here, whether it's I want to enter in a dollar or some kind of a cash amount. Remember, enter in thousands. Whether it's not yield restricted to the RBO. But again, once you enter in escrow information in the prior debts section, escrows tab, you will get a warning saying, hey, if you entered anything in that global proceeds escrow tab, that's not being looked at, because now this is a specified escrow that you're setting up. Even if it's 100% bond, fill the bond proceeds, it will override. It won't count both, won't double count. So prior debts detail, it's going to keep it. This is where we can, a number of things. One, pull in, existing, for example, the 2018, 2020 bonds to refund. You may have, sometimes we will get that you may say, look, I don't have any, I've got cash flows, that I want to add or just use, for example. That would be in this section. That's from screen entry. And so here's the dates. This pertains to your escrow. This pertains to your savings. So you may have some kind of cash flows that you need to add, or from the existing, you may go, oh, my interest is, I need a match interest. It's not quite, it's off by a penny or off by 5 cents. How can I add or how can I subtract from that? You could go in there. Now, these are cash flows. It's not part of, a lot of the refunding or refunded stats. Obviously, it's not going to show up on summary of bonds refunded report, for example. Um, so if these are bonds that are refundable, of these, put them in the actual series. If not, you can do the cash flow section. By default, you can go in here, this is 100% defeased, but, you can also not select. Now, obviously, these bonds, well, not these, the 20, 26, 27. Let's see, was that 20? Huh, interesting. Yeah. So obviously, these bonds aren't going to be part. You don't have to deselect. We will get a warning message just saying, hey, you've created bonds that mature on or prior to the delivery date. Um, but if you ever go, certain maturities, I only wanted to fees 1 million out of the 2 million. You can deselect. Now, you may go, I don't, I've got a lot of maturities and I've got to make a lot of changes and I don't want to fully defease. Is there a better way of doing it? So a lot of times we'll get I have a percentage, for example. I want to refund whatever, 85% across the board. How do I do that? Do I have to go into each individual maturity and try to figure out nope. You just highlight all the bonds and then you go into input bonds, click on the dot, 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 and there's an import button. You want to overwrite, say yes. And now you can see the series 18, 20, all these bonds. You may have specific ones where you could type in and so forth, or you can highlight certain cells, all the cells, right mouse click or F5, modify times point, let's say it's 85%, and it will update for you. 85%. If anything highlighted, and you'll see over here, 100% is 151,500,000. And you'll see 85%, and you can say, okay, that's great. Now, if you don't want that or you mess up, again, you can always go back, click import, and it will snap back. Or you go, no, I want to defease 100% of the 155 or whatever, and you go, okay, that's fine. Funds on hand. This is where you have any kind of set aside payments. You have any kind of reserve fund, a prior reserve fund, any kind of issuer contribution. Couple of ways. One is you can create it, funds on hand. You can create a negative expense in the proposed refunding series, a negative expense, whether that's a negative amount upfront or a negative based off some kind of formula that's upfront. Will show as other source section of the sources and uses. So I could say, let's see, reserve. Let's just say it's at, say it's 100,000. Again, in thousands. And we want to apply it towards the escrow. We want to purchase a slug um, first and then fill the remaining with bond proceeds. How will we do that? Well, we could give it some kind of short name, same short name, and then BP for fill with bond proceeds. Obviously, these are both not fill with bond proceeds. Again, F1 key. We go in fairly detail. So we did select first. Solution requires the same securities to be used for all escrows. So total requirements funded by one escrow, one cost, and then it's carved up to the individual escrows. But it may be ratable, proportional. A lot of times we recommend hitting F1 if you don't quite know. If these aren't yield restrictive, you can again hit NA, or you can hard code in some kind of specified percent if you wanted to. The lead key will snap it back. Back here, if this is adjusted for the bond solution or applied to savings, a lot of times when you view your savings report, when we get to that, you'll see a PV savings section at the top and then a summary section at the bottom. Summary is up front. If it's some kind of a cash flow, and you know when that's gonna, you know what the rate is, you type that in. That will show up on the savings report. It's selected yes, and it will also adjust. If you just put cash flow, it will just show up that 100,000 on the first interest payment date of the savings report. So remember, anything, the default settings, more times than not, it's up front. Doesn't mean it's always, but it wouldn't make sense if the default was, say, as cash flow. Right? Anything you have to scroll off your screen is typically not used, or it's just not as commonly used in the program. And then same thing with advanced sections. This is prior ongoing expense. So if you did create a prior ongoing expense in one of those or both actual series and you need it to adjust or be applied towards savings and the solution, you would click on advance and activate that. And you remember our objective here was or is to create level savings. So go in here and click. Now, if you ever instead have an existing portfolio, you can always create that hard code in through the portfolio section if you know the par amounts, or if you don't know the par, but you know what the securities are, you can enter it in here. Obviously, you need to know, and this is typically done if you run the numbers, you're trying to match someone's numbers, and you're not quite matching exactly. The issue with either one of these is no matter what type of, let's say, security you select, it doesn't update what the correct interest class, interest frequency, interest date basis, denomination, minimum, so it's expecting you, if you're going to hard code in your own portfolio, regardless if you have the par amounts or not, it's going to assume and if you don't, and you leave it as is, and they don't really adjust, they don't quite give you the right, say, interest because you don't have the right, let's say, interest date basis selected. The program's not going to override and say, hey, this is a T-bond or a T-bill, and it should be this interest date basis. That's wrong. It's not going to do that for you. So Just kind of give you that little tidbit there. Oh, save that. Okay. So, we could, no, it says no error, no escrow purchase date has been specified. So we go, wait a minute. What did we not do? We did not, just make sure 2020, that goes to 50, 60. Okay. Yeah. So we have the prior selected attached. We go into the proposed refunding. We need to put in our new assumptions. So say 6/1/24. There's different ways of entering. You can do space, you know, you can dot. I think there's about 5 or 6 different ways you can enter it in. Um, so let me just make sure. See, we're going out to 60. Okay. So the new assumptions in this case, I'll just say it goes out to, I'm just going to create a serial bond. No, this is going out. I put in copy down, right mouse click, copy down. Again, all this is in the tutorials. Also get a lot of, behind that, but get a lot of savings here. But you'd put in your new assumptions. But again, if you know this is going to be part of a multi-purpose deal, that you're going to run project finance, you know, and you've got reserve funds, you've got cost of issuance, underwriter's discount, expenses that specify, I would highly recommend waiting and doing it in the project finance. That will save you a lot of going back and forth, and or in this case, say issuance costs. You want to calculate that definitely on an aggregate level and allocate it. Because even in the project finance level, you can specify to a specific series or component. It doesn't, it's not all calculating in aggregate and allocating across all series. So by save that. Okay, so then we talked about the one or more refunded bonds mature on or before the delivery date. Purchase date falls on a weekend or holiday. 6/1 is global proceeds not used, a series ignored when all requirements are met, escrow the prior debt, have the solution option fill. Yep. So again, this could be kind of a quick, just make sure you've got, I could say save as. And again, you can go to any other refund case, different issuers, different data files, and you can still load it. And again, it's kind of in that tools, preferences, internet settings tab where I showed you about the slugs and open markets. If you scroll to the bottom, which let me just show you this as well. Tools, preferences. I would probably recommend. We've noticed some clients have problems, retrieving or finding their save files, and it's usually by default it has something to do with their data files being cached. A lot of times we have to say no, switch it to no. If you have the latest version of the program, we do have not only automatic save feature now, but we also have an auto save recovery. And again, in help readme notes, it goes into that. So again, don't think if you can't find a file and you think it's gone, don't just assume that's the case. You know, there is an auto save recovery. Now, we haven't seemed to have any issues with clients. Rarely they come back and go, nope, it's gone for good. But just at least to let you know that. Don't ever think that, well, I got to just automatically start over because someone deleted it or I can't find it. And so, but reason I went here is to show you. Okay, we got report packets. And again, you can create as many different report packets as you want, or if you need to. So what happens is, again, if it's selected to a shared drive and someone moves it, then you go, where's all my report packets? You go to tools, preferences, come down here, click on the ... and then go look for it. If not, it will, like in my case, it will pull up for the first time. So I'll show you, kind of show you if you haven't done this already. So now I want to save it, or I want to load. See, when I load, it automatically goes, well, I don't know where it is. Or if I want to save first time, I already had it. I'd put it on my desktop but if it's the first time, I'm going to give it a different name. You would just click open, right? And it starts from scratch. Or you can say, you know what? I don't want to do that. Go back here, back to my original. See, it reappears. So you can create as many different report packets as need be. So view, this just kind of get a quick overview. Make sure, let's see, you've seen in refund, but I wanted to make sure cash, okay, gives you the results, savings on both levels there, the bonds that are refunded. It will go more detail when I get to the project finance, but it's always good to kind of just, before you start doing everything in project finance, 1.4, kind of like I touched on a couple of weeks ago, make sure, view that bond solution report, unused revenues, that's the savings. You probably won't view this report as long as the savings output is what you're trying to achieve. But if you can imagine, if we're not bonding for certain bonds in certain years or certain refunded series and certain maturities, or let's say triple, let's say we're refunding 50 million for a couple of years here. And let's say it's in the middle or in the end, it's hardly any. Well, it may not be possible to get level savings. Well, the savings report's just going to show you the difference, prior, new, and that's it. And you remember it was upfront, that 100,000 by default. That's and it's just showing you the notes. Now we get this a lot. We'll say, oh, these are zeros. How do I don't want to produce zeros. Well, then you can go in, we can do proportional. Yeah, it's done across proportionally. Escrow cost, but then you'll go, okay, but I'd like to see it broken out amongst the 100,000 and so forth. So anything, any report that has parentheses, you can highlight, you can modify. I'm going to do alt detail. So remember we had that prior reserve, the 100,000. By default, the escrow reports are in aggregate. Now you can see, select first, we're purchasing that slug. Select first, fill remaining with bond proceeds. So this looks great. This part looks great. That's $1. Very little dead time. So we got the refund done. Now all we have to do is set up our new money, and then we'll pull it into the project finance. So click new, select advance, go new. It's going to be proposed series, right? By default, proposed. And let's see, 6-1. And again, cost of issuance, underwriter's discount. We're not going to worry about that at the moment. And I'll kind of stick with, let me just go out. Let's see, we'll go 60 and then we'll do another term bonds. Arial. This one. Put in some kind of a whatever the rates happen to be, yields, price, and so forth. And again, I'm going to have a new money project fund for this. Let's say I have a cap I for this reserve fund. Then what do I set it up here? If this is just going to be proposed, not part of a financing, I probably would. If I knew it's going to be part of a financing, I wouldn't. But again, I'll show you, as long as it's an icon, you can copy or cut and paste from a proposed refunding or a proposed series into a project finance. Let me just do one. Let's do a term 65. Select term bond. Again, this is the new money proposed series. I'm going to save that. Now, this is where we're going to create our project finance module. In order for us to start then importing the refund case and the proposed new money series. Again, I'll select new financing. Click OK, click Save. Project finance assumption setup. This will just kind of give you an overview of in the setup. Um, anytime you need to make any kind of changes on a project finance level, you'll probably come in here. For example, you may have multiple refund cases, and you may have some kind of an escrow yield limit that needs to be changed on a global level. You can make that change. If not, as you can see, as defined in refunding, slug rate is defined in refunding. Well, you may have selected, for example, in the refund case, the 05 June 24, and let's say you've got 5 or 10 other refund cases where you specifically selected a specific slug file. And then you realize, oh, down the road, I've got to add these 5, 10, 20 different, refund cases, right? And you're running it, let's say, based off today. And you go, God, do I have to go into each individual refund case and select? No, you can say, I want to override whatever the rate file is used in these refundings, and I want to select a specific one, for example. And this goes for savings. It may be something where it's an aggregate all in TIC, aggregate ARB. Now you might say, well, it should be automatically. Well, let's say in a multi-purpose deal, you've got a taxable, for example, a taxable series. And in the taxable series, you are going to select that it's not included in aggregate ARB and escrow yield calculations. So again, default settings, what's typically done, but as you know, if it's not a typical situation, you would probably go in the project finance assumptions, make that change. Now, sometimes we'll have clients that say, look, I don't, and we'll get into this calc agent. They'll say, look, I want to pull in, my actual series. I've got, 2018, 2020, I've got, 10, 20 different series. I want to pull them all in so I can just calculate and print reports out. Everything's hard coded in. I just want to print it out. Why can't I pull it in? Well, by default, it's not activated. You have to go to other options and you have to say, allow computation of actual series. Finally, note, if I just said, for yourself, you put in any kind of notes if you need be. This could be, I know what this is, but if, down the road, I go, wait, what is this? I can't remember. Oh, or if I myself go, wait, I have all these different similar database files. I can't remember which one I used, for this advanced class. I need to go in there for whatever reason. Oh, I've got it named. Perfect. Again, when you click add, remember, we don't see the 2020 or 2018 that you could select because those were actual series. So project finance assumption setup other tab is where you can activate and then select it. That's what you want. But in this case, we can say, let's do the new money and the refund. And again, you can go in here as we were, go in here and you can see the bonds. Master series allocation is pretty much no longer used. Now you may go, well, why is it there? Well, you know, you wouldn't in the quote old days. It used to be if you did have um, expenses or you did have funds, well, you had to kind of create a master series, um, a status master series, and set it up. And then you'd go in here and you can link to specific. It was kind of it was a process that took a lot more time. We can't remove it because, we do have clients that have used it way back, basically when I started up for the first like probably 8 years. And so we would never want to have someone, for whatever reason, pull up a file where they created master series and all of a sudden go, wait, I can't, where is it? You know? So what's really replaced it is this universal components. And so, but universal bond solution, this is great. This is, how do we want to compute this um, on a project finance level? Now, if it's straight up, I have a new money, I want to solve level debt service, a loan, and I want my refund to solve level savings alone. No wrapping, no solving or solving in aggregate. Um, you don't need to create a universal bond solution. Okay. Because right now, if we ran it, now we'd have to create a project fund. Obviously, nothing is funding this, but let's say we did create a project fund and we have, let's say, issuance expenses. Yeah, it would solve. Now you'd have an aggregate ARB yield calculation, um, but you wouldn't have overall level debt service wrapping, right? Because we haven't set up a universal bond solution for that. So real quick though, the financing component setup, this is where, and this happens a lot. Like if you have a taxable series, let's say there's another series added here and it's taxable, you would probably select no. And then in the project finance assumption setup, you can go, oh, is my savings going to be based off of every series included or not, or just what's included? So, it can get fairly detailed in exactly how you want to calculate and what's included. Contingency group, this is if you go, look, overall in my financing, I want aggregate rounding to be less than a bond. Now, that may mean one series needs a negative rounding amount in order to achieve aggregate less than a bond amount. Finally, if these are not plain par bonds, the aggregate could be obviously not lower than 5,000, but within a premium bond. And now there's sometimes ways through a universal bond solution that you can reduce one in order to achieve aggregate, less than a par. But as you can imagine already, knowing if all the bonds are, let's say, premium, all the refunding and all the new money are premium, then the objective really is to get it less than a premium bond because, if you do everything right and it says rounding is $5,150. And if you can imagine, if I reduce it by one premium bond, that's going to take 5,000 off, but it's also going to take that premium and then your overall could be a negative amount. But the contingency group, this is where you would enter. If you say, I want to share. And again, F1 key, it goes into a lot more detail terms of what's included, what's not, and talks about the rounding and so forth. So, but if you create a universal bond solution and any, basically that will override this content, not always, but I'll show you. Basically, if you solve either a new money or a refunding in a universal bond solution, then you're going to have to make a change in there. That's basically the contingency group here. And I'll show you. So if I click add, I'm just going to, and it says, well, if I select both, that means I want to solve aggregate whatever solution. Now you'll notice very similar series selection. We'll start the bond solution, solution adjustment. That's the same thing as in any particular refund or proposed or actual, this section, the last, solution assumption section. So, but if you can imagine, if I set it to level, that means I'm not structuring my savings to be level savings. We're trying to make anything here selected to achieve level debt service. So this isn't really, this would be more like, if you got, let's say, multiple proposed or multiple refunds, and you go overall, I want to solve aggregate, level savings. Now, sometimes we will get, well, can I do it aggregate and on a standalone? Well, there's ways you can do a proportional group, but in a lot of cases, no. That if the math doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, that it can't solve overall. And then also, and that depends on a lot of factors too. How much are you structuring per series and so forth. So I can go back and go, you know what? This is when I want to solve in aggregate. I want level aggregate debt service. Where do I add the refund? It's just like when we went over a couple of weeks ago. We showed you additional debt service or wrapping. And I'll add that as well. I'll add that just because I know some were not here, and this is a little more advanced. But we can select the refund. So what we're saying is, because the refund is not selected here, right? The refund is going to solve by what we select, in this case, uniform, level savings. And then in aggregate, we want to wrap the new money to produce level aggregate debt service by selecting the refund. Now, contingency group, what if we say, I want overall level, wrapped aggregate debt service, but I also want to share contingency. I want to try to produce, less than a bond in aggregate. You go select globally. That's the key. Now, you may have a global target amount, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the universal components, this is where we can add all our funds, all our expenses, and so forth. Add, if I do new money, let's say it's 250 million. Our type, project fund. By default, anything created as a universal component, it's going to calculate an aggregate, then allocate. Obviously, we don't want a $250 million project fund in this scenario to apply, proportional by par across to also the refund. What do? We can unselect and just select the new money. Now, if we didn't do that, and you thought, oh, embed, that just means there's going to be a $250 million project in the new money series and a $250 million project in the refunding. This will be more if I'll just show you like a cap I. So deselect. Now, if you say, well, I do want to allocate it, but I want to do it, proportional by proceeds when you make that selection. But again, this is just a new money project. We could go in here, we can put in the draws. If you know the draws amount, you do that. I'm just going to do an upfront 250 million. Let's just say, just to show you the different ways, capitalized interest fund. This generally is created, or it's calculated. We'll get this a lot, and I touched on this a couple of weeks ago. We get it a lot. You'll look at your net debt service report and you'll say, why do I have a general fund? Well, a lot of times it's a capitalized interest fund that is calculated in aggregate. So it's taking the aggregate interest of the new money and the refunding. On an aggregate level, it's funding at 100%. But as you can imagine, it allocates it proportional by par. So it's not the allocation amount doesn't equal 100% on a per series basis. So there's a difference there, and a lot of times then a general fund is needed. So just to kind of show you, if this was, let's say, two new monies, and you wanted it to be calculated on a series level, the cap I, you do embed into individual series, do net funded GIC, and again, tell you, so bond interest accrued through, let's just say it's 1, let's see, about 25. And then if you did have some kind of a reserve, I'll just do that like that. Again, by default, aggregate, allocated, we go, that's fine. And we say, well, but that's another reason why you may get a general fund on your debt service. Almost every time, look first, if you have a cap I and a reserve fund, your cap I takes care of 100%, in this case, interest through whatever, 11/1/25. Well, if you have interest earnings during that period in a reserve fund, you don't tell it where to go. It can't be applied towards debt service because that's taken care of. A general fund will be created until it can be released. So we can just say another fund. You can allocate a new money project if you want. Let's do cap I in this case, and then debt service, and then maximum. Now, a lot of times we'll have, well, what if it's aggregate? In this case, Um, the maximum or debt service, I think, is going to be the same, but you can add the word aggregate. That will be based off the aggregate report. That means if you have any like unrefunded debt service, any existing debt service, and that needs to be included, you would add the word in aggregate. So the word aggregate, you can just imagine it's going to, you're going to base the numbers off the aggregate debt service report. If the aggregate debt service report, we'll get this a lot. Someone will say, I have existing debt service. I'm going to enter it in here. Additional source of debt service. Why is that not being calculated as part of the max annual aggregate debt service? Well, if you view the aggregate debt service report, that screen entry isn't entered. It's not shown, I mean. And then it's, well, how do I show it? We'd say, okay, don't enter it in there. We want you to go into a particular series, say in this case. There's a couple of ways, kind of like, and again, if you weren't here a couple of weeks ago, a couple different ways. You can do actual series. You can, use the debt service calculator to pull in specific, amounts and export, or you can go into other debt service. Let's just say this was a 2021. I'm going to stick with the same thing. I'm just going to go to 45. Again, you may have Excel, you may want to import. You can, copy paste. You can also link it to other formulas. You may, obviously the more detail there is an other debt service report, or you may just have, let's say, some kind of total debt service amount, right? I'm just going to put $1 million, but again, you'd hard code in all this information if need be. So we go back here and we go, how do we include, well, that's going to be included, but how do we include in the structuring the solution? So right now we're saying level debt service, wrap around the refund, right? How do we include the other debt service? Well, since the other debt service was created in the new money and that's selected here, we could just, basically it's the same thing as a couple weeks ago we did a wraparound other debt service where we just selected the wraparound other. Now when we run the numbers in the aggregate debt service report, you will see not only the new money, not only the refunding, but you'll see this 2021 other debt service. And so if we don't select, we don't activate this, that means it's not going to be included in the solution. So when you do view the aggregate debt service report, it's not going to be level because that other debt service isn't part of the solution. And if you don't view the solution report, that's when you go, okay, why is the aggregate debt service report not level? And I can kind of show you back and forth on that. Universal escrow, this doesn't occur very often, but sometimes it will. You may have more than one refund case. And a lot of times it's whatever matching numbers, or you just say, look, I have one escrow. I know I've got two different separate refund cases, but I've got one escrow, one set of basically requirements. How do I do that? Well, long story is you'd go in here and press yes. Right? That would override. And you could put your assumptions in here, whether it's slugs, open markets. But here's the thing, it does not allocate. So that means all the reports, all the escrow reports, you have to view in aggregate. It will not allocate. So there's a misconception sometimes. It's, well, I want one universal escrow, but then after that universal escrow, it's going to then allocate across the different. No, it doesn't. That's almost like wanting a separate escrow per refunding. So that's kind of universal escrows. That's just not used so much. And if you do use it quite a bit, I think that's probably a better example is just sending us your file and saying, hey, how come it's not? A lot of times what happens is they don't activate it. Basically, you'd have to go in all your refundings and you would have to deactivate global proceeds escrow. You'd have to remove everything out of the escrows tab. Then it will know. It'll go, oh, you shut off all escrow settings. So we know you want to solve, or you can override it and just select yes. Finally, the reporting options. This is where you want to add additional titles. It's footnotes, just like in all the other modules. You can do certain reports. You can also include them or not. If we break out these reports, summary, detail level, alternate text, anywhere in the reports, that's a DBC generated text, and you don't like it. The big thing is, whether it's all or specific, the big thing is make sure the original text, you type it in exactly. And I always give the example, I don't want the title of, I don't want sources and uses title report to be in all caps. Well, the original has to be typed out in all caps, replacement in non-caps, or how you see fit. It's real finicky about that. Component selections. These are somewhat new. Calculate ARB and escrow per report group. Obviously, this happens a lot of the times where I usually see this more than two. It's, hey, I've got two refundings and I've got a new money. And I want the refundings to calculate. I don't want to go in here. See, the problem is if you go in here and you've got three and they're all included, right? Nothing's excluded. Well, but I want my two out of the three to have some kind of an ARB yield calculation. And then I want one out of the three to have its own. How do I do that? Well, you'd have to put in the different report groups and you would activate calculate ARB escrow per report group. Select all, okay. And then you could type in, whatever we see the slot tag, or, whatever the titles would be, and it would group them together. Save that. Now, for issuance expenses or anything, there's different, you can do itemized expenses. Let's just say it's do this a lot. So when I mentioned before, if you have some kind of a subsidy expense, and again, this is an FAQ, We're getting this more and more. You know, the way a lot of people do it, they'll go when they're 18 and or they're 20, and they'll just straight up create it as the expense in the file or in the actual series, then go into the prior debt advanced and activate. But then we get a lot of, I want to see it broken out as its own separate column in the savings report. Or I've got a partial refunding. I just want to calculate off the bonds that are being refunded. Well, you can create it in the proposed refunding series, or you can also do it on the project finance level. So when you determine what's included, what's not included, what yield, but you could say minus 0.13 prior interest. Now, if you don't type it in correctly, you'll notice you'll get a noise. It'll say general data error. Okay. It's real finicky. Again, F1, I would say, in terms of using the search, NLF stands for language or natural language format. I would probably go in this little area, the NLF, whether it's examples we actually wrote out, and they can get fairly complex. You know, if then type statements where it takes a certain amount, a percentage of the first, you know, say 50 million, then anything greater. And or they can be very basic in nature. But I would go to F1 if you know, NLF, type that in. But we give you introductions, examples, operations. This is where you can round up or down an expense. So you may say, well, I need to round up to the nearest thousand. You know, it's given me 900 and something, you know, how do I do that? I would recommend, I would say that's, you may be past that, but I would say probably on anything about this program is learning kind of the formulas. Once you kind of get that down pat, I think it's kind of smooth sailing, but that's why we're here. And we get a lot of support on that. But now you can either do it directly in this area. You know, if I cut, you'll notice I can paste it. I would say if it pertains to a particular refund case, a refunding might make more sense to have it in the refund, but I'm just showing you any kind of an icon. You can go back and forth. So what happens is a lot of times clients will send us their project finance and it'll be a lot more than just two. And they'll say, hey, in my new money, I've got all this cost of issuance, all this underwriter's discount, entered all in there, and then did the same thing in the refunding. Well, I don't want to calculate it on a per. How do I cut and paste that? Well, it's not in an icon. It's in those specific tabs. You basically have to start from scratch. Let's say it's cost of issuance, underwriter's discount, issuance expense. This is where you can go in and you can say, you know, that you can hard code in all that information. So also a lot more flexible. So if I said, you know, 250,000, if I said, you know, 1% of total par, that doesn't work. Say par You could come in here, you could say average takedown. You can say, let's see, underwriters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You type all that information in, whether it's some kind of an amount, you could say 5 per bond. If you go in here, press space bar or click, it's not limited to what's showing on the screen. There's no way we could have every conceivable formula pop up. Um, so all that said, let's just say you go, wait a minute, what if I I would like to create, this happens more times than not with expenses, especially itemized expenses, right? Like if it's just some kind of a, you know, and again, we can decide include, non-include, could also be part of underwriters, part of cost of issuance. So you could see here where you could say underwriter's discount, I want to calculate and allocate the, you know, or you could say, well, what if I just want to apply, the 150, thousand of a particular fee out of all this to one series, but all the others are going to be allocated, showing like this. Well, you'd really need to remove this and create it in a separate expense because you now have different allocation option, um, you know, uh, calculations. So you can, whatever that amount happens to be, 500, whatever the amount happens to be. Now, all that said and done, sometimes we'll have clients say, look, every time I do deals, I kind of create, it's almost like a blueprint. Do I got to every time start from scratch, create, kind of the same expense setup over and over and over and over? No, you don't. You can, anytime you see an icon or you create an icon, you can save it and retrieve it. But again, it seems like the best use of retrieving this is through expenses. So, for example, if I said, if I copy and I go to tools, component gallery, something's already been created. Right mouse click, go paste it in here. Cut. Oops, it's going to cut that. So it can be in a different database. It can be, in a different issuer, different project finance in a different database, brand new one you just create. Again, tools, preferences, just like slugs linking it, just like report packet, component gallery, same thing. Click add and you'll see it. Double click. Now, obviously, you'd probably have to change the formulas, something like that. But this just goes to show you, or if you go, you know what, I didn't want to do that one. I wanted to do issuance. So that's where you can retrieve. Create it once, and then you can, right? So we got all the project finance here. You'll calculate. And again, okay, that's fine. Okay. So do sources and uses. Let's see. Funded escrow. Let's do our escrow reports here. For, and we got that. Statistics, bond pricing. And we'll have universal. Oop, don't need that. Uh, Now, a lot of times we'll need to modify. You may also want to, um, let's see, break up for table of contents purposes. Break up. Um, we noticed this in clients that said, look, I want to see it kind of broken out per, you know, the new money and then the refunding. Now, anything in aggregate, it'll show up in aggregate together, and then it will then break it out on a table of contents per series. How do we do that? Well, anything that shows as breakout or aggregate, that's considered aggregate section. And then anything that's modified. So if I said these savings, I'll do summary, modify that to annual. Let's see. Probably have that go down. Let's see, we'll do annual. But we can also do net debt service in aggregate. Annual. Okay, aggregate. No, something like that. A debt service. Okay, aggregate debt service. Let's say that we'll do that in aggregate. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, and again, we could say that if we wanted to save it, we put a different order if we wanted to. I'm going to do, so this is what happens a lot. We'll go view. So, well, that's not how I want it to look. I kind of want to break it out. I want to see an aggregate table of contents section, and then I want to see new money and refunding. How do I do that? It's a couple. One is we need to do, I think it's multi-report purposes only. Just like any other report. If you don't like something included or you want something included, a lot of times you have to go to that particular. If you say, I want the details, I want it itemized, I want to see them itemized, you would make that change here. Project finance, I want to group by series. Let's see if that works now. Yeah. So we get this quite a bit. This is how I want my table of contents to look. Right? So any report that's in breakdown or aggregate, that's what's going to show first. And then based on the ordering shown in the project finance module, it's going to then, per any report that we modify to summary or alt detail or detail, will then break it out. Or if you just say, that's fine, I don't really care about that, I'm not even gonna. I would say most times you're going to probably want a table of content, but you can either do no or do it by series, and it won't show it that way. But this was modified to breakdown, which you've seen or have seen, where it's showing. See, within a bond, these are going to be the size globally. Bond summary statistics. Oh, I wanted to include one more report, just because it's one of our newer. If you ever don't see some reports, again, preferences, available reports, go into the particular module. For example, we have specific reports, debt size and cap I. By default, it's just we have them all under one called reserve you can add. So I would go into each one of these modules, print preferences, available reports, and just kind of look through and see if anything's hidden on your end. Okay, so my computer's a little slow today. Okay, so that. Well, it used to be, we got so many, I want average coupon. I want to see average coupon per maturity. And I was like, well, you have to basically create a serial bond per bond component, and that's not fun. So we created a bond maturity statistics. And again, in preferences in the stats tab, you can include or not include. There's information we can add to this and remove. But this is fair. This is like our newest report. Um, and this was really to tackle a couple of things. One, we had a lot of average life, um, request per maturity. Also, why are certain bonds priced to the call versus price to maturity? It's the lesser of. So we wanted to show, well, you have your call table set up correctly. It will give you what's the yield to the first call and versus yield to the maturity. It's going to be the lesser of those two. And that's what's going to show up, especially in your bond pricing report. So we had a lot of that was how come certain of these bonds are not being priced to the call? They're instead being priced to maturity. Well, a lot of times it was, well, it could be, it has to fall under the pricing regs, but um, this report has really helped because it shows. Um, and if you want to override that, you can go into the bond component, advance assumed call date, price tab, and you can hard code and say, I don't want the lesser of maturity or call. I want to price it to the call. I got to match these numbers. Okay, here's where you do it. So, but yeah, bond maturity statistics is it's not super new, but it's our newest report that was added. Bond pricing, again, we can bond debt service, as you've seen, is all together. Aggregate debt service. Let me just put that back to aggregate. Because again, if it's, you know, when you view the reports and they match up, you're probably not going to view the solution reports. But again, more times than not, Um, so everything's included. It's all level. But that's making all the correct check marks and adding and all that kind of stuff. So if it's not, then a lot of times universal bond solution, this shows overall, this matches, in this case, the aggregate debt service report. But if we didn't check include other debt service, for example, this existing debt service column would not include the other debt service in with the refunding. And you'd go, wait a minute, why is that? Well, you'd go to the universal bond solution and you would make that change. Universal formula verification, if you had a lesser of test, net debt service, here's that BAB sub. We probably don't want to include that. Hold on. That's good. So you can go to special treatment, not charged, included. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? Actually, oh, don't want to do it this way. Sorry about this. Well, this is good. Okay, here's how we would do it. We're going to do an other formula. This is good. We don't create as an expense. We're going to create as another formula, and we're going to adjust the savings and the solution. Because again, we want to kind of break this out into a separate column. How do we do that? We put the formula here. Oh, dang it. Let me see. How about 25% higher interest? So you put it as another formula. And then we have to adjust savings and the solution. How do we do that? Savings, expenditure adjustments, screen entry, prior cash flow adjustments, select the BABs, the other formula. So again, if you can imagine, and this is also an FAQ, there's a solution and a savings portion of the program. Right? So it's not automatic going to solve equal on a solution and a savings. For example, you could create this other formula based off a prior interest, a percentage. Say it's subsidy, it's a negative. And if you only go in here and go screen entry and adjust just the savings, well, what's the solution portion? The solution portion is prior debt service. But you remember, our savings is going to be what? Prior debt service minus that stream of that percentage of the interest, and gives you some kind of a net prior debt service. So the solution will basically be not including the subsidy in this example, but the savings will. So you won't see the savings level because it's not solving. How do we include it? Well, we include it by selecting the other formula, BAB. That will adjust that revenue constraint that we're going to solve off of. So now when we go back and we calculate, okay, it's still level. Let's see. Debt service. Let's see now. because that was broken out. Let's see, bond debt service. Let's get to the, okay, we got summary bonds refunded, which we saw. Savings. Now, see that prior adjustments. Now, again, how do I change? This is good that this brought up. You say, look, I don't want to say prior adjustments. I want it to say subsidy expense. How do I do that? Note, prior and adjustments fall on different lines, right? How do we do that? Well, we could go into, I think we do reporting options, alternate text. So it's prior. It's shift, it's the pipe or the up and down. Typically it's around your backspace or return, upper right. Um, mine is right below my backspace key shift. It's an up and down symbol. Prior adjustments. I want to say I want it to, or subsidy prior. So remember, if it falls on a different line, a column, title falls on a different line, you have to kind of use this, I think it's called a pipe, or I just can't remember. It's the up and down symbol. Okay. I think I have to, let's see. No, I do have to calculate it. Prior adjustments. Should have just deleted reports, but didn't want to at this moment. There we go. So but again, if we just applied it in the and we didn't adjust the revenue constraints by this savings would not be level. And that's why you go, well, I don't, again, the savings report's just going to show you, here's what's included in the savings. Here, here's the comparison. You'd have to look at the bond solution report. So this is the refund, remember, because that's not being solved in the universal bond solution. Revenue constraints happens to be the prior debt service. So here it is right here, less the subsidy. So what's the total? 236,585. And 236,585 prior net cash flow. So that's why it's real important to view the bond solution and universal bond solution, because it's going to show you, in this case, if it wasn't included, that amount would be a lot different. It would not include that. It would be based off of the gross prior debt service. But in this case, 1.2 million and change. Net debt service, the refunding, shows you the cap I and then the reserve formula. Well, it's a scalar, vector scalar upfront, vector ongoing. Okay. Now, on we also get a lot of times, well, that's great. What if I'm just pulling in a certain series, and I don't want, anything solved on, on some kind of aggregate level. It's really mainly just to kind of print out or calculate on a per series basis and then kind of show it all together. Well, one of two things. One is, you can go in here and allow, if they are actual series. We also have something called Calc Agent. This is also where you can do sensitivity analysis. Let me select that. I'll select, I don't think, yeah. Okay, good. We'll get this a lot, that if, I don't know if you guys do sensitivity analysis, but you take a refund. Let me just go and, oops, take this one. So you can take a refund like this one that we just created. And you could say, here's the base case, -1, whatever. Or whatever you want to do for the report title. Um, Here's the base case right now, running it off of today's numbers, everything. What if there's some kind of a bond yield adjustment that's negative, positive, as well as escrows, negative, positive? What kind of results? Um, net PV's results, for example, savings results. What will happen given these adjustments? Again, sensitivity analysis, calculate it. And these are just kind of a few. Um, there is a specific report for Calc Agent. This is included with project finance module. So you can see here's the base case right now. Here's our net PV savings, which matches with your savings report. Well, if you had some kind of a offset, negative, obviously, you'll have an increase, vice versa, decrease. And there's things you can also add to this report through other formulas, but just kind of showing you, you can break it out to, now we can make that change, but you see the base case, but it can be broken out per all on one report, also on separate reports. Zoom out. Here's all, basically the differences with different adjustments uh, that are made, and even broken out, savings, the minus 0.2. Here's what the structure would look like. Minus 0.1. Base case right now, the 1.4. 1.46 for, then it goes to 1.41, then 1.36. So that's, there's a couple of different, and again, F1 in here talks about more about the sensitivity analysis, but you can all, what's really good about this as well is that it gets saved. You go to file, also when you hit open, you'll notice a Calc Agent here. Now, a lot of times, even if you, this, save that. We have batch runs, but the problem is on batch runs. Let's see here. I think you have to calculate. Yeah, batch runs. The only problem about this is that it's very similar, But again, it doesn't get saved. It's kind of hidden. You have to do it within, like in this case, a refunding if you do want a batch run. Um, that's strictly up to you. But and then if you finish your file, that doesn't get typically sent. Um, Other thing is if you do specific or not even specific, but kind of a very vanilla. If you know something is a fairly vanilla type deal, we have something called Easy Agent. This is where you can create a new bond using or go to an Easy Agent main menu. I'll say just real quick how to do it. It's only 4 or 5 steps. Okay. So if you click OK, new money deal, that's your only option. So if it's a refunding, project finance, sorry. And I could say titles for identification, I could say issuer. I could say, whatever, Q. Additional titles. Again, these are very basic and, there's nothing you can add. There's nothing hidden. Can I add this? Is there any way I can? No, it tells you, if you said, oh, it's on a 630, for example, what's the first serial maturity? You could say 6/1/25. You could say first term 6/1/50. Can I add more? Nope. That's and again, coupon yields. I could say, let me just go copy down. It's 0.0125. And let's say this is at, or I could do point. Oops. Are these cabs? I could say, sure, some of them are cabs. Are these callable? Sure. Let's say they're all callable. Term bond. Then let's say they're not convertible cab term bonds. They're not callable. Let's just say. Next. What is it? 6/1. Let's say 34. Underwriter's discount. Again, if you wanted to, well, can I create it? Is it some other thing? No, you'd have to skip and then just add to it. So let's just say it's, 250,000. You have insurance. Now, let's say I do have that interest rate ARB, interest flow cap I, capitalized through, say, 25 ARB. There's no accrued interest, but if you did, other uses, construction fund, let's just say it's a $450 million amount. Net fund, IC ARB, calc, create series. I'm going to create a new one. You can put in an existing one. There you go. So as you can see real quick before we dive into it, easy agent. Oop. So let's go through here. Everything, deposit, 250. And we type the 7. So you see all the blue font, serial call. So it's already calculated. Put all of our inputs in. Now, bond pricing, bond maturity. Let's see. We want it at level. So as you can see, if you go, well, I want it to be fill at a certain, and we can do that in a second. But here, calculate, show you real quick. I don't know if this would be helpful or not, but this kind of shows you if you want to do kind of a quick and dirty, and it will, it's only a few different pages, but you'll see some of these calls and you'll go, okay, well, why are some of these calls? Maybe some are not. And again, what was that? Obviously the 34, these were also callable. But it's up to 630. So those have already matured, right? Callable cabs. Oop. And the maturity statistics. See, it shows you, for example, yield to maturity. 1 point, say yield maturity for this 41, right? Serial call. That's what you can go, well, why is it? Well, to the call, it's 1 point, yield to first call, 1.19. It's the lesser of. So it's showing you. So I don't know if that's something, I just know that it's never really gone over, and I think this was added in a number of years ago. I think, gosh, probably like 2000 and maybe like 2000 and no, like 90, I'm trying to think, see, 96 to 2000, probably around 2005, maybe 2004. So it's been a while. But again, like we went over before, on the advanced, this new money, or in this case, and then bond solution. So you might go, well, that's great, but I don't want overall level aggregate debt service. We need aggregate, some kind of an aggregate amount in debt service. Instead of 15.5, let's just say I want 16 million. How do I do that? 16 million overall. Okay, from 25 to 65. 16 million. Enter dates. Or whatever the debt service amount happens to be. How do I, well, first off, we type in the amount, 16 million, and we want to do a fill. And we're going to see if this is even possible. Fill in aggregate to 16 million. Now, you'll see that greater than, and this comes up a lot on a fill. You'll go, I've got 13 million additional proceeds. Well, because we now have a different objective. A lot of times you need to fund, your project fund's not enough, for example. we'll deal with that. But Universal to meet 16 million. So as you can see, if you view the, obviously the aggregate debt service is not level because that's not really your objective. Well, I guess it would be for the to make 16 million a year. But again, if you don't include certain things, you don't set it up right, it's not going to show. But you'll see unused revenues less than a bond. So this does produce this saying you only need 282,670,000 par to achieve that. So a lot of times it's, well, you need to set it to excess proceeds. You'll see now it's fun. Or what you might do is you could go level debt service and you could say, instead of it being 250 million, you'll say, let me just see here. This sometimes comes up that you'll have the results for your refund, but you'll say, my objective is, um, that's because of that. So let's say your objective is 500 million total, or not even that, 400 million total, right? How do I do that? How do I get like 400 million globally? Right. So you would go here, you would type in the global target amount. We need to reduce by the refund, right? Because the refund's going to be having its own par amount. But overall, we want 400 million. So whatever the refund produces, subtract that out of 400. That's what's going to be for the new money. So you have the 400 now. Obviously, if you also hard coded in a $250 million project, then you're going to have some rounding issues, right? Because now you're saying this has to be 250. This has to be 238,050 to meet 400. You know, you're going to have to do something. It's not, what was it, two? We'll get this sometimes that I've got to, whether it's a global amount or I set my par, I hard coded it in or whatnot. Yeah. So you'll see here. And what we'll say is, hey, you want 400 million. This is locked in, the refund. It's 161,950. The difference, that's locked in. That's locked in. These are not going to be able to generate less than, this is locked in, right? Because the cap I is doing 100% of the interest. That's locked in. So, you know, most likely it's you've got to go to your project fund and do excess proceeds because maybe early on it was here's my objective and then later on here's my objective. That way. Now, anytime you have something like this, you can easily in access mode total. You can also, if you like to, you know, load in or have a bunch of different reports, for example, you can save them as an Excel multi-tab file. So I'll do a desktop and I'll do Q2 save. Save. Yeah. Can everybody see this? I'm assuming everyone can. If you can't, holler. Um, so this will just export. Now, obviously, when you scroll over, it's not going to show how it's computed, but um, and then finally, if I did a new, and let's say you go, look, I have in Excel, I've got, um, project fund, day, draw dates, right? Draw amounts. Oops. And you could say it starts in, let's say 7/1, 24. Whatever the draw, if it's going out to, let's say it's 11, like we were doing before. 10, right? And whatever they have, 12. Big, 12, 5, just to show you 6, 7, 8, 42. I'm just going to do the same amounts. So if I said file, retrieve, I don't want to do it. Let's do it desktop. Let's do Q2 draw example. Okay. So what's the range here? I'll go back here. New money project. Right. So we need to create another formula. I'll say import about project draw. Other formula, create, go to import, file name. Now you could do, absolute cell range, worksheet name, sheet one, what's the cell? So there's a couple of different ways where you can do a named range if you named it yourself, or absolute. And this time, just do absolute. What do I want to pull in? I want to pull in this column. And here's kind of important to know. Unfortunately, if your draw amounts are to the left, it's not going to really work. Like you need to make sure the amounts are to the right of the dates. So this would basically be A3 C19. So it's going to pick up only import this column and this. So it doesn't matter if you've got, numbers in between and stuff like that. It's not going to import this. It's only can import the A, two columns worth, the dates and the amounts. In this case, A3 C19. So A3 C19. We don't need to create a formula, okay? Because it's going to import the information. When it imports, if correctly, in this case, I'm going to select project draws, do calculate. I don't need to put any dates or anything like that. So anytime you see anything that says draws from other formula, anytime other formula, for example, other formula, other formula, just know anytime that can export, import, right? And then I'm going to do one more. I can just say bond, how about debt service, bond, export. And I could say, aggregate, other formula. And let's say it's going to be kind of the same. Let's say sheet 2. Okay. And I could say dates, whatever you have typed up. Now, I don't know on when exporting, I don't know how far it'll go out. So I'm just going to, in this case, I'm going to do, A2 to whatever. I'll say A2 colon, um, you know, how about C? Or it doesn't matter. B, I don't know, 500. And what do I want to do? I'll say aggregate debt service. I want to accumulate it annually. So I don't want to export it. Let's say they all have different interest payment dates, for example, right? If you do accumulate annual, and I could say even aligned to, let's see, 6/1. So here we go. Now, depending on how many other formulas you have and how robust your computer is, that can potentially slow down the calculation. You can only imagine if you've got 20 of these and you got 20 different, and you got all this stuff going in and out. That, I didn't mean to do that. It's okay. So what do we do with a project fund? And then, aggregate debt service. So here's our project fund. Remember the scheduled draws? The 12, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I don't think I meant to do that. Oh, good. It ignored the comma. That's interesting. So that imported correctly, right? Also, universal formula verification, just so we know. Oh, somebody's mute everyone here. Can't remember how we mute. Somebody's. Camera mic. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that worked. Project fund, so that imported correctly. So here's the aggregate debt service, the 14 million and change, right? Oh. Now we can eliminate the 6/1, we could say starting 6/1/25, but as you can see here, and we could do a through date as well. That 592, 260. $592, 260, 245, 66. Yeah. And your universal, it should also show you the import export, right? The aggregate debt service, 6/1/24. And again, I should have just done aggregate debt service starting 7/1/24 through, whatever the 6120, 6165 or 6164 or whatnot. It goes all the way. So that kind of just shows you, not only can you select reports, you can save them you can say, as an Excel, XML file. Um, but you can also import, export. I would say also, if you're using the program, um, it's always good to kind of not have it running. And this goes for any program. Um, Having multiple programs, just even if you're not using them, just having them, in the background for long periods of times. Every once in a while, a client will just say, "Hey, when I'm printing the numbers out, they look weird, or something's not." More times than not, it's, "Oh yeah, no, I haven't." My basically your PC system resources are low, and a lot of times what we do is when we open up your file, when you send it to us through help, email data to DBC, we don't have a problem. And probably the first thing I usually do is say, "Hey, can you exit out of the program and then launch it?" And if it's, "Well, I'll still have problems." And every once in a while, you have to reboot your PC, and that works. That's great. Um, so just remember, if you've got lots of programs running, depending on the power of your PC, your work, if your PC system resources get low, things can get a little weird. um, I think I think we covered quite a bit. Um, Trying to think what else. I mean, the main goal in project finance is the different parts. Setting it all up. As you can imagine, in the tutorial, it assumes you've set up the different refundings in the proposed series. We give you, I think, some kind of a sheet of, here's the info. We assume you know how to set all this up, and we just start from the project finance level. Whereas you take a training like this, um, have to kind of reiterate, okay, I didn't really want to just have a new money and a refund already created, and we go from there. Because even in a refunding, it's people that don't really, how do I set up funds on hand? How do I allocate that to an escrow? That's kind of considered a little bit more advanced than just a basic refund. Um, so, um, we went over Easy Agent, Calc Agent, the import, export, other formulas, how to link other formulas. Um, but again, if you did have some kind of a, um, other, existing debt service, for example, right? And you did have, starting in 25, let's say to 39, and it's 10 million. You already have this in Excel, and you go, I don't really want to. I mean, to me, it'd be just as easy to copy, to go here, copy. Let's say it's in the new money. Oops. Is this one again? You got 25. Let's say it's 20. Other debt service. And you can say cancel, and you could just, but you could also, and 25. Here's where we can get into, we only, I'm going to just do embed, go into that. And, oh, why did I do that? Yeah. Okay. Import, file name, desktop, is a sheet two, cell range, F28, G42. See, edit, make sure that that's one thing is you go in here, create another debt service. You'd have to hard code that in. So let's see now. There you go. The 150 million. So as you can see, you know, any anywhere you see anything about other formula, other formula in the project fund, you know, that's a way to um, link. It doesn't seem like we have a ton of clients that do the import export thing. Again, um, the more you created these, and depending on how robust your computer is, that can potentially sometimes slow down calculations. Something like this, it's not going to. But that's just at least to kind of give you a show you if you do want to import export, you can. Um, so I want to at least kind of touch on that and give you a few examples on that. I can't think of anything else in particular to show you. I know this is a lot of information, and I know everyone's probably super hungry. Hopefully, you're not all on the East Coast. If you are, hopefully you'll still be able to go run and get some lunch. I can stick around for a little bit if anybody has anything specific to ask me. Be happy to answer if I can. If not, then that to let you know. Let me see if I can figure out how to get to show you real quick. Um, let's see. I think you could do a DBC. I think I did a training. Yeah, finance training. This is where I created. If you could, that'd be awesome. I don't know if I'll be able to put this up today. But again, the goal is, as you can see, these are, hour and a half, 42 minutes. I want to start doing a bunch that are, let's say, 10 minutes long or even 5 minutes long. Um, so if you obviously get a chance and, you know, go on there and subscribe, like all that kind of stuff. That way, whenever I do start putting videos in, it'll let you know. And this goes for any of your colleagues or whatever as well. If they weren't able to make it, um, that way, um, I really want to start to get this thing moving and try to cover a lot of stuff because, even if you have support help, if it's not during support hours and you forgot to save all your other DBC uh, prior support responses, and you go, God, I can't remember how to do such and such. And there's a video that's specifically on that and, whittled down to not very long. I think that would just be helpful for everybody, you know. And so far, though, really the only people that know about this are the ones that um, took the took the class a couple of weeks ago. And you guys, obviously, some of you took it a couple of weeks ago, but um, I'll try to put it in some kind of a link as well. But yeah, if you get a chance, that'd be great. And but everything else, um, thanks for signing up. I'm glad everyone. It looks like everybody who signed. Um, I think there might have been one person who wasn't able to, but that's great. That's rare. So hopefully everyone got something out of this. And yeah, I guess that concludes our training. Take care, everyone.